And away we go. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Welcome, one and all, ladies and gentlemen, to Coffee Talk, where we will be having a discussion about what is going on in the world today, taking a look at some news clips and reading through them and having a discussion with some of the people that join us on the live portion. And of course, the live portion is on YouTube on Coffee Talk or at Coffee Talk Live, more specifically, as well as Prepper University. And that's at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as well as on X, formerly known as Twitter, and that's at Coffee Talk Chat. And I can't see the people. If you leave a comment on X, I can't see it, but there you are. And of course, there is Fistful of Radio, fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon, unless otherwise specified. As we get ready to dive in, and I'll read through. Naturally, for those of you who are listening and not able to see, I read through as many of the comments as is reasonable so that you can keep up with the conversation. And I'll go ahead and acknowledge some people that have chimed in thus far. And that is Helter is here, Dragon is here, Donna Beaver is here, and reminds people to give a thumbs up. Yes, please do. Very much appreciated. And Holly is here. Delo is here. Cyberjack Sr. is here, as well as Velvet Pilot has joined us thus far. You see, I'm joined today also, for those of you who can see, by Dusty sleeping in the chair behind me right here. Dusty's in the chair and Uncle is in the doorway, but you can't really see him. Stacy Lynn has joined us. Thanks for coming in today. And also, new additions. I don't know if anyone has seen the short that I put up earlier. There's 3 new cats in the backyard, kittens. They can't even be a month old. I've never seen them before. But I put up a short with that. I'm assuming because there was one of the cats in the back is an all black, long-haired female with green eyes, and who is obviously pregnant. And I'm like, are they hers? Because they're hanging around with her, but they don't match her at all. But that's not entirely unusual. So yeah, that brings us to 13 cats. 13 cats. So 3 of them were 2 long hair and 1 short hair with similar patterns, all 3 of them bouncing around under the porch this morning. I see Ragnar Thornshammer has joined us, as well as, if I can get this to open, Alina is here. Says happy holidays, David and company. Absolutely. Urban Angst is here, as well as Gary Edwards, as we get ready to dive into the news. And again, that was just my own news that we are now at 13 cats. And I just gave away 3 not too long ago. Well, adopted them through the vet, that is. I don't just give people cats. I work with a shelter and a veterinarian. The shelter is Halo House, which typically manages dogs, actually, but we've worked with them a few times in the past to try to find good homes for some of these little sweethearts. As we get ready to jump in here to what's going on in the world today. And the big thing is the migrant crisis, and the migrant crisis, or the migrant industrial complex, because there is huge money in this, huge money. And it's not just in the United States, it's all over the Western world, even though the United States is getting hit the hardest out of all of them. And this is an article that comes from The Hill. And The Hill says, racial profiling and unjust deportation at the border must not spread nationwide. They should have a question mark on the end of that statement. They should have a question mark. Oh my God. And reading into the article now, it says recent press reports suggest that as part of the funding package for the Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, the Biden administration is considering, among other troubling proposals, expanding the use of expedited removal, the government authority to swiftly deport immigrants without hearings from anywhere in the nation, To be clear, expedited removal is a policy that goes far beyond the border and would target the civil rights of the nation's 62 million Latinos and disrupt and undermine the nation's economy and social fabric. Really? Okay, what else? If I can get this to open. All Americans, including the Latino community, want the border to be safe and secure. The asylum system is broken and must be fixed, but support for a sovereign and well-managed border should not be mistaken as an endorsement of congressionally sanctioned racial profiling and the mass deportation of Hispanic immigrants with children and families in the U.S. Our concerns are not idle speculation, but the result of decades of history and experience. The proposal harkens back to previous mass expulsions of Latinos without even a semblance of due process, and it must be rejected. And their reference for the last time this happened is 1930. It says the largest mass deportation in 1930s occurred during the Great Depression when 2 million people of Mexican origin, an estimated 60% of whom were American citizens, were rounded up by the government and expelled to Mexico. Yeah, that was almost 100 years ago. The Hill. That was almost 100 years ago, and that was during the Depression. That was an act of desperation, just saying. And rounding up and expediently deporting or repatriating, if you will, is something that the government was already doing until the Biden administration put a stop to it, which is why they're just flooding in here now. And the majority of people coming across the border that would be on the chopping block are not from the South America. They're from the Middle East and Africa, the majority of them. And even some from Western Europe. We're getting a lot from Western Europe. We're getting them from China. Remember, China had the individuals from the People's Republic of China are coming across the border in record numbers, thousands and thousands of them. These would be the main targets for deportation, not Latinos. And you're going to hold an incident that took place during the Great Depression in the 1930s to the standard of how a mass deportation would be carried out. That's a stretch. That's a stretch. And here we go. Stacy Lynn has joined us. Read through a couple more of these. Alina, oh, I read that. Yeah, Alina says, happy holidays, David and company. I think I read that, didn't I? Urban Angst is here. Oh, yeah, I did. And Ragnar says he's got 7 himself, and I think he's referring to cats there. Gary says we got 2 male cats, Duffy and Con. Velvet Pilot says Merry Christmas. Indeed, it will be Christmas when? Monday or Sunday? Sunday, right? No, Monday. Sunday is Christmas Eve, and Monday is Christmas Day. Christmas Day. I may do a live on Christmas Day. I'll have to think about it. But again, this is a stretch for them to say that Latinos in particular are going to be deported using something that happened in the 1930s as an example of it. And with no consideration to the fact that, like, expediently locating and repatriating people that are in the country illegally is how every country basically handles illegal immigrants. And that's how we used to handle it up until the last election, the last presidential election, that is. But this is a fluff piece. That article is a fluff piece. And that's all that is. Trying to convince people that somehow Latino families are going to be targeted in a mass deportation, if it comes to that, which is something that both Donald Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy have promised to do, because they know that's a huge issue and not just a so-called ultra-conservative Republican viewpoint. Most U.S. citizens, including former immigrants who are now citizens want this to stop. It's a massive problem all across the United States and indeed all across the Western world. Urban says it's only a matter of time before there's a migrant class action lawsuit to grant them squatters' rights in citizens' homes. God, don't even joke about it. Oh, man. And because of this type of attitude, that type of press, that type of article, you get stuff like this. This next one will knock your socks off. And this comes from DC News. Migrant groups plan to rush the border and block ports of entry in February. Well, why is that happening? Let's read the article and see. San Diego border reports several migrant advocates in Baja California are calling for mass border crossing and blockades at ports of entry from San Diego to Brownsville, Texas, to put pressure on the U.S. Why? To allow more asylum seekers into the country in the coming months. Apparently, according to advocacy groups, there aren't enough coming in. The groups are threatening to have large groups of migrants hop the border fence on February 2nd, one organizer told reporters in Tijuana earlier this week. If we don't have a resolution by February 2nd, we're going to convene blockades from Tijuana all the way to Matamoros, says Sergio Tamay, director of, hold still, of the Angeles, sorry, it bounced. It's the ad blocker's not working. Angeles Sin Frontera shelter, and we're going to hop the fence and rush the border as a symbolic gesture. It says Tamale said he knows many migrants, or Tamai, excuse me, not Tamale. I don't know where I got that from. Tamai said he knows many migrants who will take part, will be stopped and returned to Mexico, but it's something he's willing to risk if some do make it across the border. So he's willing to risk other people getting caught and arrested and then deported so that he can prove his point. Gotcha. This is our way of telling the United States, do you want this? Tamai said, do they want us to organize this mass illegal crossing? You basically in that sentence just admitted it's a mass illegal crossing. So to try to force the US government to allow more people across, you're trying to organize an illegal action. Seriously, that's an invasion. This is our way of telling the United States. Oh, I read that. Tamai stated that the demonstration is also aimed at the Mexican government for not supporting migrants in their quest to get north of the border. Why should Mexico support these people if they're not from Mexico? Mexico needs to worry about their own people, and this has got to be disruptive enough to have hundreds of thousands of people from all over the globe cutting through Mexico trying to hit the borders in California, Texas, and Arizona. That's ridiculous. And Stacy says, are you doing anything for Christmas? What do you think about the holiday? Sorry, it's off topic. No problem. We're not really doing much of anything, and we don't put too much emphasis on the holiday. That's primarily something I mostly did for the kids. But, I'm not like, oh, goodness, it's Christmas. I just, it's not a big deal. Not a huge big deal to us. We're not going anywhere, or anything like that. And I never really got into Christmas anyways because it wasn't celebrated in my house growing up. I didn't get Christmas. That's, if you've seen some of my older videos talking about that, my birthday is right close to Christmas. And my mother used to tell people, oh, well, because his birthday is so close to Christmas, because my birthday just passed. It's so close to Christmas, I just do them both at the same time. And everybody's like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. If it were true, maybe it would have been. But the truth of it is that she didn't do either. So I grew up without birthdays and Christmas celebrations or Thanksgiving or any of that. So, I'm just used to it by now. Gary says you have to separate the criminal elements from families and children. No MS-13, no cartel gangsters. The rest get corporate sponsorship if they're willing to work. And then Spectre says, good day. Glad you could make it, Spectre. But I mean, again, this is assuming that everybody crossing the border is from South America. They're not. They're the South American border crossers at this point are a minority. They're a minority. Here's another quote from Tamai. Both governments, talking about Mexico and the United States, both governments could make it so much easier for the migrants if they wanted. But the citizens of Mexico and the citizens of the United States don't want to make it easy. We don't want these people flooding in here. It's too much. It's too much. Again, legitimate asylum seekers, okay, I get it. But all these people, hundreds of thousands of them, and we don't even know who they are, and they're not being vetted at all, coming from all over the globe, crossing the southern and the northern border, people from the Middle East, people from Africa, people from China, crossing the border, people from Eastern Bloc European countries. And it's like, how the hell did they get here in the first place? Yeah, it's too much. It's too much. It's crushing the United States and it's killing us as far as taxes. And it's so much so that some of them are trying to go back. We read the article about that a couple of weeks ago. A lot of the Venezuelan migrants that were given work permits, because this year, almost a million work permits, around 750,000 work permits were granted. And they're returning to Venezuela. The one guy was quoted on the interview in Chicago, the American dream is dead. There's nothing here. There's nothing here. You give us a work permit and there's no damn jobs. What do you want us to do? I may as well go back to Venezuela. At least I know people there. I totally agree. He was fooled into coming here. He was told, yeah, you get a job and we'll set you up in housing and we'll get you health care and we'll take care of you. And none of that, it didn't work out the way they expected. Plus, they're freezing their butts off in a lot of these northern states, and that's something they're not used to. Urban says, I propose that zero Mexican citizens be allowed legal immigration to the U.S. until Mexico can better control its own southern border crossings and international seaports. And Bingo is here. Bingo joined us today. Glad you could make it. And Gary Edwards says some illegals have been in the U.S. for years and are genuinely invested in America. They have bank loans and home ownership. See, I mean, if they're contributing to society as a whole and not just being a drain on it, I don't have a problem. But that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening, and that's the problem. And stuff like this doesn't help. And then this attitude of, oh, well, the U.S. and Mexico need to do a better job. For who? For who? And for what? And then you admit that it's illegal and you admit that it's a problem in your statements, and you're trying to organize them breaking the law even more. That's your solution. That doesn't make any sense. Which brings you back to, why the hell are they bringing them here in the first place? Why is the Biden administration, why did they throw the door wide open and send the message all over the world, come one, come all, and we'll take care of you, knowing that we can't? They must realize that we can't afford it and that we have no room for them and that there aren't enough jobs. There aren't enough jobs. There isn't enough placement. There isn't enough money to go around, no matter how much you tax us to death. We can't afford it. Why do it? Well, here's one thing that people have speculated on, and we're going to jump from the southern border all the way to Boston. All the way to Boston. And this comes from the Independent News. Boston passes measures for migrants to vote in minor elections. Conservatives state it's unconstitutional. New York is trying this too. And Urban says it's replacement theory 101. Now, New York is also pulling this crap. And there's a shot from the Charles River here. It says something interesting is happening in Boston. For most countries in the world, whether an immigrant is a taxpayer or not, they typically are not allowed to vote. And there's a reason for that. Other countries would typically hand out a permanent resident identification card to allow them to stay and work in said country, but they're not allowed to vote. However, liberals are thinking that non-citizens should also vote. According to Boston.com, the Boston City Council endorsed a proposal allowing non-citizens with legal status to vote in local elections, a measure passing 8-4. Mayor Michelle Wu, and remember her, she just got in trouble recently. We talked about Michelle Wu last week because she's the one that had that, she sent out invitations for a people of color only Christmas party and sent them to too many people by accident because people that were not invited, aka white folks, also got an invitation and caught wind of what was going on. So Mayor Michelle Wu and state legislators must greenlight it. Facing hurdles before implementation, the move aims to grant non-citizen immigrants in Boston paying taxes a voice in city polls. Following that, Councilor Kendra Lara, its proponent, shared her father's inability to vote for her due to residency despite 30 years in Boston. Lara's last council meeting featured her impassioned stance. Non-citizen residents with legal status form over 28% of Boston's population. Yeah, now they do, contributing $2.3 billion annually, and that's tax dollars, I guess. Similar rights exist in 15 plus U.S. cities like San Francisco and New York. Concerns over legally voiced by dissenting Councilor Flatterly and Flynn highlight potential obstacles and citizenship jeopardy for mistakenly voting non-citizens. And there it is. And Tracy says Americans are going to Mexico because it was cheaper than America. Now it's getting expensive in Mexico and the food is getting gringoized. Gringoized. And Monkey is here, says he joined late. Donna says California is going to let illegals be cops. I would love to see how that works out. Yeah, they did something like that in Chicago. They tried to pass that as well. Like they can't find actual citizens to join, so they want to allow for immigrants to be able to work on the police force. I think that's a huge mistake. I think it's a huge mistake for them to work in law enforcement. I think it's a huge mistake for them to be allowed to vote. Her father, she's talking about her father having residency in 30 after, even though he was 30 years in Boston, living in Boston for 30 years. How come he never got citizenship, Laura? Why did your father live in Boston for 30 years without ever getting citizenship? Why didn't he bother? But then he wants to vote, and that's some kind of a problem. Somebody explain that. Urban says similar culture fooding issues in British Columbia, which is causing a massive white flight to Alberta, Canada. And Tracy says earlier this month, President Putin made it clear that if people migrate to Russia, you will work and learning the native language. And you should. If you go to another country, you should learn that country's language, have an understanding of their culture, and be willing to be part of that community, which includes contributing to it by working. And Monkey says, did you hear California's lieutenant governor wants to follow Colorado's footsteps and not putting Trump on the ballot? No, I did not hear that yet. I did not hear that yet. And All People is talking about the migration invasion led by Lyndon Johnson's Hart Celler Immigration Act. And Gary said native-born cops don't like to work for anti-cop liberal governments. I guess not. I guess not. But that's my question. She's passionate about this because her father was never given the right to vote, even though he lived in Boston for 30 years. But again, he was never a citizen. So, yeah, of course he didn't get the right to vote. And that's not something that's typically allowed because then you don't have to worry about influences from outside of your country controlling how the voting process is going within your borders. That's why that's done. And it's not a foolish thing. That's a smart idea. But there we go. And that's also the argument that a lot of people have made. Never mind the fact that they're breaking down American structure. They're breaking down American culture, diluting it, destroying the American identity with a massive influx of people from different countries who are not interested in America's culture and bring their own culture with them. The whole melting pot concept, it doesn't really work in practice. That, oh, our strength is our diversity. No, it's a bunch of weak links is what it is. So they're diluting the country and breaking it down because they think they're going to build something else on top of those ruins, but they're not going to be able to control it. They're foolish if they think they're going to be able to control any of that in the long run. And we'll jump to California, since California was just mentioned, although this is a completely different topic. And this comes from MoneyWise. It says severe revenue decline. California faces a record $68 billion deficit. Here's what is eating away at the Golden State's coffers. And one more here from Tracy. It says, if voting worked, we'd never be allowed to participate. Mark Twain. Yeah, no kidding. Absolutely. And George Carlin used to say similar things. So getting into the article, and again, this is MoneyWise. Where are we here? It says California is facing a record $68 billion budget deficit. This is largely attributed to a severe revenue decline, according to the state's Legislative Analysis Office. So California is dealing with a revenue shortfall, partially due to a delay in the 2022-2023 tax collection. The IRS postponed 2022 tax payment deadlines for individuals and businesses in 55 of the 58 California counties to provide relief after a series of natural weather disasters, including severe winter storms, flooding, landslides, and mudslides. Tax payments were originally postponed until October 16th, 2023, but hours before the deadline, they were further postponed until November 16th, 2023, in line with the federal action. California also extended its due date for state tax returns to the same date. These delays meant California had to adopt its 2023-24 budget before collections began, without a clear picture of the impact of recent economic weakness on state revenues, according to the LAO. And the LAO, of course, again, is the Legislative Analysis Office. And it says total income tax collections were down 25% in the 22-23 season, according to the LAO. A decline compared to those seen during the Great Recession and dot-com bust. Federal delays in tax collection forced California to pass a budget based on projections instead of actual tax receipts. Aaron Mellon, communications director for California Governor Gavin Newsom, told Fox News, now that we have a clear picture of the state's finances, we must now solve what would have been last year's problem in this year's budget. So, according to the state's Legislative Analysis Office, and according to the communications director for Governor Newsom, the reason that California is broke and $68 billion in debt is because they didn't collect enough taxes. It's got nothing to do with mishandling or misuse of funds, bad spending policies, worthless programs, and other government money pits, useless committees to decide what to do with money. Nothing to do with misuse or misappropriation. It's because they having trouble collecting their taxes. That's the reason why they're broke. That must be it. And I see Lady Pop is here. And Tracy says, ask the Native Americans how the diversity works. Yeah, they can't even get along with each other. They still don't. Again, you know, I get that personally from living in Kansas and watching the Native groups. They get along well when they're in council and they're on camera. But otherwise, aside from that, they can't stand each other. And I see Brian is here. Glad you could make it. Helter says lots of new proposed policies will only increase expenses across the board for most. all products and services. Newsom wants to be president, yet he can't control spending. Such a great leader. Yeah, he fits right in though, because Biden's got the same problem. Urban says in Canada, natives get a sweet piece of the federal pie in most provinces via transfer payments, zero transparency, and no accounting. No one really knows how much money is sunk into reserves. Well, I mean, you get money for being on reservation in the United States too. That's why they won't leave them, even though they complain about living there. And Gary Edwards says rich folks moved out of California starting in the 80s. Unfortunately, they exported their liberal gunk into other states. Here in Washington state, there were comedy shows about California zombies. Dragon says California really needs to focus on streamlining their taxes while not impacting revenue and streamlining their regulations and red tape. Well, I'm sure they could dump half of their programs. I'm sure they get a bunch of social programs and a bunch of committees and a bunch of other things that they're wasting money on. That if they got away from that they had spent the tax money properly, they wouldn't have a deficit. But then, again, when you spend other people's money, you really don't care, apparently. And Gary says Bill Nye, the science guy, started on a new show called Almost Live, which he made fun of the California invasion. Really? Because he usually acts like he's in bed with all that liberal crap. Because, again, Bill Nye is an actor. He's not really a scientist. People look at him that way because of his Bill Nye the Science Guy show. I've talked about him before. This is the guy with the bachelor's degree who worked in engineering briefly and quit to be a prop comic, which is how he got the Bill Nye the Science Guy gig in the first place. He reads scripts. How much of what he actually knows, that remains to be seen. Somebody needs to pay me to read a script. I wouldn't do it. If I didn't agree with what was on there, I wouldn't do it. And so I wouldn't be able to keep the job, unfortunately. Isn't it a shame how that works? If you have integrity, they don't want you. They don't want you. But yeah, again, they love wasting the money. Oh, we need more money. We need to fix taxes. We need more taxes. We need to increase taxes. And they push and they push. You see how high the property taxes are in California now. And that's a result of this, needing more money all the time instead of fixing the spending that they're already doing. And that's something that every state and the federal government are guilty of. And I've pushed it out there time and again. If they got rid of all the garbage programs, if they focused their money, if they took bids instead of just throwing money at things, they probably could operate on about half of the amount of tax that they take from us now, which is already too much. And Monkey says it's like paying off a loan with a loan. Yeah, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, as they used to say. Only Peter never gets his money either. They never get it. They never get it. And, on that subject, well, not on that subject, actually. This is entirely different. This is an entirely different subject than Governor Newsom's blaming not being able to collect tax revenue properly or on time for his money woes, or rather his community's money woes, because it's the citizens of California that are suffering, not the lawmakers of California. And again, yeah, it's ridiculous that Newsom wants to run for president. That would be about as bad of a disaster as we're seeing now under the Biden administration. And Brian says, egads, how dare you suggest they stoop to common sense? They know what they're doing. It's being done on purpose. And I've speculated before we move on to the next article real quick here. I think that Governor Newsom and other lawmakers in California are deliberately destroying the state. And I think that they're doing it so that they can seize property and sell large swaths of real estate to these billionaires, these tech giant billionaires, because that's what's been happening. You have shopping centers and you have rows of office buildings and things like this, and the taxes are so high they can't keep anybody in the buildings, and eventually the building ends up getting abandoned and the state seizes that property from the landlords and the property holders because they can't afford to keep paying taxes on it, and they turn around and sell it for pennies on the dollar to these billionaires, and they're trying to build their utopian cities in those areas. This is what's happening in California. And I think that the lawmakers in California, again, opinion, that the lawmakers in California are doing it on purpose. They've got some kind of shady behind the scenes deal going with these billionaires to destroy these property values so that these billionaires can scoop them up real cheap and then invest the real money in the construction projects so that they can make their equivalent of the line that you've seen in Saudi Arabia. And so I'll catch up a couple more comments here real quick. Gary says driving down real estate values. Yeah, it does, because that's what happens. You make the taxes so high that your rent is insane. No one can pay the rent. The building, whether it's an office building, apartment building, office park, shopping center, whatever it is, it empties out because no one can afford the rents because the taxes are so high. Then the landlord can't afford to maintain it. And sooner or later, it's going to get seized by the state and sold at a private auction, or public auction, rather, I mean. But it's happening to entire city blocks in California right now. Nature Nerd says Newsom is more of a threat than Biden. He would turn America into California, where over 1 million people have left since Newsom has been governor. Yeah, the only thing is, where are we going to go if we leave the United States? And Tracy says buying shit you don't need for 34% interest just to put in a useless sale. George Carlin. Yeah. Gary says then miraculously a conservative government will enter in and solve crime and homelessness. Yeah, maybe. Ta-da, back to normal once the new landlords are in place. Yeah, exactly. And Tracy says the government reminds me of George Carlin talking about buying useless shit to put it in a useless sale. And Urban thinks that Newsom is a proxy of China. And Nature Nerd says the dumb billionaires are going to have failed ghost cities like China and become in debt if you build things and expect them to fill up with people when there is no demand for it. Let them waste their money. Let them waste it. Let them burn their money out. The hell with them. They shouldn't be interfering. Is this the right article? I think this is the one I'm looking for. And this comes from Watertown TV. Watertown TV. Watertown WWNY television. It's a local article, but it's interesting and it ties into something we've talked about before. It says, slow down, North country lawmakers say when it comes to electric buses. And they're talking about school buses here specifically. And this is Watertown, New York, not Watertown, Massachusetts. So as New York State gets ready to roll out state mandates on electric school buses, 2 North County states or country states senators are telling Governor Hochul to hit the brakes and either lift the mandates or fully fund them for the school districts. State Senators Dan Steck and Mark Walshik and 14 others Republican senators say Hochul's timeline for switching school buses from diesel to electricity is a major concern, specifically because of cost and cold weather. While this might be a good first step to do in an urban area like New York City or Buffalo, it's not a good move to do in a rural part of the state, Steck said. Steck is referring to New York State's 2027 mandate. That's not that far off, requiring all future school buses that are purchased to be electric and not diesel powered. The senator says the cost to the school districts could be as much as 3 times as originally anticipated. He believes the cost to buy all new school buses for New York State will be as much as $20 billion. That's a significant chunk of money. It's not money well spent, and it's going to take away from other core missions of the state and that our schools need to be doing, Steck says. This is where are we? Steck's sentiments are echoed by fellow North Country Senator Mark Walshik. The 49th District Senator says in a statement that the school officials have spoke with are more concerned about other issues like a decline in enrollment and the quality of instruction. Well, that's been going down for decades. But anyways, yeah, a couple of comments here. No kidding. It's Gary says too much the electric bus. Yeah, it's too expensive and it doesn't work. Nature Nerd says, how about have a flat tax with no loopholes? The government will have more revenue and people will have more money since they don't get penalties for working more. Now, you think that they would have learned their lesson already. About a month ago, we read an article talking about electric snowplows in New York and that they had to get rid of them. They had to cancel the program because there's a mandate in New York for all electric service vehicles by a certain deadline. And they had those electric snowplows, and the damn things don't work. They're not strong enough to push the snow. They break down because the cold is too much for them, too much for the engines. You know, those batteries don't work well when it gets cold. And they don't last very long. And usually when you get those plows out during emergencies, they're out for 12 hours at least. And those buses could only go a few hours and they die. And so now you want to replace, you've watched that failure, walked your way back on the electric snowplows or electric snowplow trucks because they don't work and gone back to diesel, but you think electric school buses are going to work in a state like New York. Okay. And I'm from Massachusetts originally. And I'll tell you the weather will get bad enough that those buses are gonna stall and fail. They can't handle it in the in those northeastern states. There's no way. Plus, they cost 3 times as much as their diesel counterparts. That was the argument also with the electric versus diesel snowplows, that the electric ones were 3 times as expensive as the diesel. So it costs 3 times as much and it doesn't work. But you want to spend $20 billion on electric school buses in a state that says it's broke and is laying off police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and sanitation workers because you're losing money because of the migrant crisis. But you're going to spend $20 billion on electric school buses that you know cannot handle that climate. Did I miss anything? Tracy says electric vehicles are stupid. They would be good had we kept up the electric grid. Watertown, New York isn't far from the Canadian border and Fort Drum. Now, if they were wired in, okay, because part of, and actually I think it's Watertown, Massachusetts, if I'm not mistaken, the buses there, and this is even in the 80s, they had electric buses in the 80s in Watertown, Massachusetts, but those buses, they had the prongs and connected to a cable network that was hanging over the street, like a trolley. It was like a trolley, but it was a bus. And so it was getting a direct grid feed. They didn't operate on batteries. That's different because you're using a bus like a trolley. But a battery operated, I don't care how advanced they are or how far we've come. I don't see it working. Gary says the magic bus by the Who, very prophetic. Yeah. Who fan? There you go. Urban says Canada is unwavering in its 2035 goal of all electric, which is fairy tale time. Try it in the prairies in January and February. Yeah, that stuff will freeze up. Wait for it. Wait for it. Bingo says, I can't believe people are willing to let their kids on a giant lithium bomb. I'll never trust electric vehicles until they stop using lithium. It's too volatile. Yeah, can you imagine if one of those things caught fire and they light up fast? That bus will be engulfed very quickly if the battery is overheated or punctured. And Frankie says they don't care. It's just an excuse to shuckle and jive tax money into their pockets. Yeah, because they don't care. I mean, $20 billion. You're complaining that you're broke. You're laying off people that you need. You need your sanitation workers. You need your sewer workers. You need your firefighters. Okay. You may not want to admit it, but you need your law enforcement. You need your EMTs. Oh, but you're going to let them all go. We need money for the migrant crisis. Biden won't help us. It's all Texas's fault because they bust them up here. Okay, fine. You want it to be the sanctuary city. This is what happens. But you've just demonstrated just a month ago the electric snowplows don't work. We wasted our money. We spent like 545,000 a piece on these. And the diesel trucks cost a third of that much. And the damn things don't work. Oh, but let's spend $20 billion on of your tax dollars. Let's spend $20 billion on electric school buses. That's what we'll do. Yeah, that's freaking brilliant. That's brilliant. How much nepotism is going on here? Whose cousin, uncle, grandmother works for or owns the electric bus company? I want to know. Gary says must virtue signal at taxpayers' expense. Exactly. And Urban says there's not enough mineable precious metals in the world to allow every family to have even one EV per household. You know how expensive that'll all get? And Frankie says if they really want to go green, then go steam powered. All that snow is free fuel. And Tracy said exactly. Watch Bolokovov live based in Russia shows the buses you described all the time. He's in St. Petersburg, Russia. Yeah, they're not going to make it. They're not going to make it. And you're complaining, oh, we need, and this is, they have this in Georgia too. They show the commercial. They used to show the commercial that from their, was it Climate Moms or Science Moms or I forget, some kind of BS that, oh, well, you know, your child is inhaling diesel fumes. You're inhaling fumes if you're on the road, no matter what kind of vehicle you're in. And I don't know what's worse, the possibility they might inhale diesel fumes or them sitting on the radiation from a lithium battery all day. You know, they radiate. Even your smoke detector has radiation coming from it. It's just minor. But if you're sitting on like this massive, like 4,000-pound lithium battery, because even the battery in a forklift, I forget how much it was. It was crazy. The damn thing was like damn near 1,000 pounds, if I remember correctly. The forklift batteries we used to use, the electric ones. How much is the battery in that electric bus? How much is that thing going to weigh to pull all that weight around? And it radiates. It radiates. So yeah, expose your children to radiation to get them away from the diesel fuels, unless I missed something. And that's what Loyal is saying. Think about the radiation from the buses. Yeah, who do you care? You know, irradiate your children so that they can't produce children of their own. It's part of the plan. It's going to make your kids sterile. And there's Boogers says, sorry, I'm late. Going to restart from the beginning. Well, it'll be there for you, Boogers. And again, here's Dusty looking very comfortable. Nap time for the cats, of course. And I'll remind you again, we have 3 more. We have 3 more as of this morning. 3 kittens, can't be a month old. They're like this big on the back porch. It's like, who are you? Where did you come from? I put a short up earlier trying to show them from the window. I didn't want to spook them. I didn't want to frighten them. Gary says, need free energy devices. The Tesla black box was reinvented by a former electrical engineer from Kenworth. Residents' free energy device made the front page of the Seattle Times. And Frankie says their minds are already sterile, so what's a little radiation? Yeah, nothing going on upstairs. May as well be nothing going on downstairs as well. That's the whole trick of the cell phone. That's what I heard about the cell phone. It's like, you know, because people hold the cell phone in their lap, and it's a way to sterilize them with radiation. I I don't know how true that is, but but it's an interesting conspiracy theory. It really is. As we toggle along here, this will be in the stupid news of the day right here. Stupidest news of the day. I look for articles like this because I'm like, wow, how did we survive this long? How did the human race survive as long as it has with people like this in the world? You'll love this one. You'll love this one. You get a kick out of this. And this comes from the Telegraph, so you know it's true. Woke attacks on Israel are an insult to who? To gay Palestinians. Gay Palestinians. There you go. There's some gay Palestinians, I guess. I seriously doubt that. But yeah, let's read the article. After a succession of somewhat pitiful entrants, the BBC's choice of Ollie Alexander to fly the flag for Britain in next year's Eurovision Song Contest appeared pretty inspired. I saw Alexander, frontman of the band, years and years, 5 years ago at Brighton Pride. He's undoubtedly a charismatic and talented performer, while his portrayal of a young gay man during the AIDS crisis of the 80s in the TV drama It's a Sin was heart-rending. Okay. Are we going to get to the point? All right, let me see. Sadly, however, Alexander's knowledge of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians and gay rights in the Middle East doesn't match his abilities as a singer and an actor. This was shown when he signed a letter coordinated by Voices for London and LGBT Direct Action Pressure Group, which utterly distorts and misrepresents Israel's record. The Jewish state is an oasis for gay rights in a region where gay people routinely face discrimination, imprisonment, and death. The annual Tel Aviv Pride draws tens of thousands of partygoers from across Israel and the world in a glorious celebration of the country's tolerance. As I have pointed out several times now, people don't realize Israel has become very westernized, and this is proof of it because that does go on in Tel Aviv. They're saying here that the presentation of Israel as a civilized, democratic bastion of alphabet rights is furthering Zionist propaganda. This isn't simply perverse, it also grossly offensive to gay Israelis who fought long and hard to make the country a bastion of tolerance. And what about gay Palestinians? There's no pride march in Gaza City or Ramallah, and no recognition of the rights of gay countries or gay couples, in Jenin or Khan Yunis. All right. So one, unfortunately, yes, it is true. What you're seeing in that picture does go on in modern Israel, or did. Okay, it's not happening right now, but it did, because Israel has become very westernized. Two, these are the types of people that were targeted during the attack, because the super liberal, super tolerant, extreme left-wing people or social groups in Israel are the ones that were in the area that was attacked from Gaza on October 7th. That was the soft target, because they will always go after the soft target. All right. Thirdly, that may go on in westernized modern Israel, but it ain't going on in Palestine or anywhere else. And they're talking about trying to represent gay couples. Find one. Find one anywhere else other than Israel in the Middle East, and I'll show you two dead people. It reminds me of the president of Iran when he was visiting college campuses, and I think this was more than a decade ago, around the United States, and he was having speaking engagements. And someone confronted him in one of those engagements. I forget where it was. I don't remember which university or college he was at the time. But they said to him, "What about gay rights in your country?" And he says, "There are no gay people in Iran. There are none." And he was like, "You don't know that. You don't know how many gay people." And he's like, "Well, they better not let anybody know they're there because we will kill them." That's how the Middle East, with the exception of Israel, handles that crowd. So woke attacks are being an insult to gay Palestinians is about the most ridiculous thing I've heard in a long time. A couple more comments here. Gary says there's evidence of brain cancer occurring on the side of people's heads from smartphone usage. Yeah, that evidence has been buried a long time ago. That I remember all of them talking about all of that when the cell phones first started getting popular, back when Radio Shack was selling them. And Frankie says Darwinism and stupid luck, that's how we survive. That is humans. Nature Nerd says, why is the U.S. Navy failing to fight the pirates in the Red Sea? 30% of the world's shipping goes through the Red Sea to Europe, so they don't need to sail around Africa. Biden is a failure. He's got the Navy spread pretty thin right now, though. Gary says strange bedfellows in the Middle East. No kidding. And Bingo says Israel is a giant woke sanctuary. In the last decade, it has turned into one. And they are now remembering, because of the attack, yeah, we're in the Middle East, and we better start acting like it. And Israel's walking back a lot of this kind of stuff. Prime Mover says, sorry, I'm a few minutes late. Can you start over? I wish it was that easy, Prime Mover. But the show will be saved. And Gary says, deliverance, banjos in Gaza. And Urban says, 2 comments auto-deleted. Really? Looks like YouTube's latest partisanship topic, I guess. Because, yeah, and that happens a lot, unfortunately, guys. As I'm sure you're well aware, their AI bot does police comments. I have no control over it. But again, this is about the stupidest thing I've seen. Worried about gay rights in Palestine. Oh, we've got to protect the gay people. Can you find one? Can you find one? You do realize that if you are suspected of homosexuality in so-called Palestine, we'll leave it there, that the typical modus operandi is to drop you from the roof to make an example of you. So I'll tell you what, go to Palestine and protest. Do that. They all want to protest from all over the world. Oh, we need to protect rights in this country and that country, but they never go there. They never go there. It's really nice and safe and secure and easy to protest from the safety of a Western country than it is to go there and try to do anything. And Prime Mover says, at least give me Kitty Show and tell time before you sign off. Well, there's Dusty right there. You want to see Dusty? Is that what it is? And Urban says, at least we know what side YouTube is on, and it ain't good. No, YouTube, I don't know what to tell you about how ScrewTube handles all of this stuff. Again, remember the short that I did showing that textbook and saying, hey, make sure you know what your kids are learning in school. I got a strike for that short. I got a yellow strike for it. But yeah, we are getting close to wrapping up here. I can grab Dusty. Dusty, you awake, honey? Come here, buddy. Okay. Dusty, everybody. And so I'll take a moment to remind you that this is Coffee Talk. You are listening to and or watching Coffee Talk, and you can find Coffee Talk on YouTube, and that is at Coffee Talk Live, as well as Prepper University on YouTube. Or you can find Coffee Talk on X, formerly known as Twitter, and that is at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter, as well as fistfulofradio.com. podcasting where? Out of Atlanta, Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. As we say hello to Dusty. See, she's very, very easy to deal with. Very, very docile animal, Dusty is. Aren't you, sweetheart? She's a good girl. She really is. And she's ridiculously soft. This is like petting a chinchilla. Seriously. It's like crazy soft for a cat. But with that, I will go ahead and sign off and say thank you to everybody who was able to join us here today. As always, hope you got something out of the conversation. And we might do this Monday. We might do this again Monday. We'll see how it goes. So catch you then.